walking off my tired feet, bound in 42nd Street to be in a show. Broadway baby, learning how to sing and dance, waiting for my one big chance to be in a show. Gee, I'd love to be on some marquee. Oh,
hello, my name is Hilary Seabrook. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. For this episode, I'm joined by Sara, Shiloh, whose latest album, the Sondheim Project, features versions of Sondheim songs performed with bluegrass and Americana feel to it. There are 5 arrangements of Broadway Baby, Ladies Who Lunch, Miller's Son, and Send in the Clowns, and Sooner or Later. What you're listening to now is Broadway Baby. And it's described as Broadway meets country. Sara's band is called Bluebird Junction. And they really bring a new take to these Sondheim classics. And this really is Stephen Sondheim as I've never heard him before, in a very good way. I'm looking forward to talking to Sara about her background, about this album itself, and about how she took this different approach to Sondheim classics. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Sara.
Tiny flat, there's just my cat and a bed and a chair. Still, I'll stick it till I'm on a bill all over Times Square. Someday maybe, if I stick it long enough, I can get to strut my stuff. Working for a nice man like a Siegfried or a wise man in a big time Broadway show.
Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World, and I am joined by Sara Shiloh. Hello, Sara.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And I gather you're joining me from probably the hottest part of America right now.
I am. It's spectacular. It's that lovely dry heat, but at night it gets really chilly and you see all the stars. It's something really. It's an unforgiving environment, but it's also really, really gorgeous at the same time.
Right. Good. Well, I'm glad you're out in the country, because this album, the Sondheim Project, is like you've taken Broadway and moved it into the middle of nowhere.
Okay. Can I steal that?
Of course, by all means.
That was one of the coolest descriptions that I've heard of that. We took Sondheim out of Broadway and moved it to the middle of nowhere. Wow. It's funny. You know who that is on the other line right now? Is the bass player from the Sondheim Project, Miles Sloniker. He's also working with us to arrange some of the original songs that Sara, Shiloh, and Bluebird Junction, my partner Max Hutzel, and I have written together. We're arranging it for a concert with the Amarillo Symphony that we're doing in November. So It's going to be an Americana evening, and we're going to be doing a classical piece. I'll be doing Samuel Barber's Knoxville Summer of 1915 with the big orchestra, and then we're arranging some of the sort of bluegrass infused stuff that we wrote for a smaller chamber, a string ensemble. And so Miles is working with us on these arrangements. So his ears must be burning that we're talking about Sondheim right now, because he also is the guy who worked with us arranging. He arranged the Sondheim as a sort of a collaboration back and forth as well.
Right. Very good. Okay. For my listeners who haven't perhaps heard, I've been playing a little bit underneath my introduction from Broadway Baby. I love Broadway Baby.
We love that one too.
Yeah. So, but explain how you came up with the idea for this album.
The idea for this album was born really during the early days of COVID. So I had just met the man who's now my husband, who's also my musical collaborator, Max Hetzel, who's a banjo player. And he's very much from the bluegrass world. And we were talking about things that we could do because we were all stuck. My season as a classical singer had just basically been wiped out. I was supposed to be singing with the London Symphony. I was supposed to be singing a tour of Beethoven's Ninth in Japan. I was supposed to be doing all these classical projects, and COVID grounded us as it did everyone. And so we were sort of stuck at home, and we thought, well, what could we do to kind of keep our spirits up? And the music that I started off in life before I became a classical singer was bluegrass and folk. And I was also a theater kid who loved musical theater as a child. But both Max and I think as adults are not so much in the Broadway world. But we both agreed that Sondheim had this like very special place in our hearts, that is sort of, Sondheim is kind of in a category all his own. And we thought, God, wouldn't it be cool to do something with Sondheim? And then Max goes, what if we did Sondheim arranged for an Americana string band? And so we thought, we'll just take it out of its context that the ear knows it, that is familiar to our ears, in this big Broadway arrangement with lots of brass, the sort of the way we think of Broadway and the way we think of Sondheim. What would happen? Because for us, Sondheim is such a quintessential American. What he does is such a quintessential American art form. There's this warmth and neurosis. It's this very New York kind of humor and musicality that is so dear to me and so familiar to me. What would happen if we merged that with one of the other great American art forms, which is Americana and bluegrass? What would happen? Would it allow the audience? Would it allow a fresh audience to hear the lyrics with fresh ears? Would it ring differently? How would it land?
Yeah, and I think it does do it challenges both audiences, doesn't it? It challenges the bluegrass audience, but it also challenges the Sondheim audience.
It does. We if I'm totally honest, I think we expected that Broadway audiences would crucify us a little bit, because we thought, well, Sondheim fans are very particular, and they're like classical music fans, and you don't mess with how it's always been done. You just don't do that. And that's, of course, exactly what we did. Yeah. So we did expect some blowback, some from the really diehard Sondheim fans, which we've not yet had. I'm a little bit disappointed.
You thought they'd be a bit more passionate about it.
So far, people have said this is the most we've gotten is this is definitely interesting, which of course, could be the, code for we hate it, but that's okay. I think that anytime you do something that is not the way it is traditionally done, there will be people who are greatly enthusiastic and people who really resent you for it. So we were excited that we got it was great fun to make, and we were very excited that the response has been what it is so far.
Yeah, well, it is interesting, but in a very good way. At this point in the podcast, I want to play a clip from Send in the Clowns, because that's your version of that is very different to how it's not a Barbara Streisand version, although your voice is, in some ways, your voice has got those echoes of that. How did you start with this arrangement?
Our arranger, Miles Sloniker, who's also our bass player, we had long conversations with him about what we were envisioning with this and the direction we wanted to go. And the song itself is probably one of the top 5 most devastatingly heartbreaking songs that I think have ever been written. And we wanted the tragedy of it to speak and the fragility of it to speak, and that the theatricality would sort of come through that instead of being in your face, if that makes sense. And we wanted it to sound like Send in the Clowns, but also not.
Isn't it rich? Aren't we a pair? Me here at last on the ground, you in midair, sending the clowns. Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around, one who can't move, sending the clowns. Where are the clowns? Just when I stopped opening doors, finally knowing the one that I wanted was yours, making my entrance again with my usual flair, sure of my life.
And so we went back and forth with Miles, who is just a genius arranger. And he came back with this, and it really, especially the intro, is challenging, because at first you're like, what song is this? Is this even Send in the Clowns?
Right.
And in a way, I love what he did with that intro. And I love the sparseness of it, because she is so naked in this moment. This woman who's reflecting on things that are lost and opportunities that are missed that you can't necessarily get back.
Yeah. There's a blues quality, isn't there? The R&B deep South blues, that the female vocal kind of heart on the line, laying a soul bare. That's that quality, yeah. Isn't it?
Well, we hope that's what we hope for. I mean, it should feel like almost painfully exposed.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that Miles went about, particularly with the strings underneath, with nothing else but the strings, it has kind of a high lonesome sound. And it also has the quality of this actress looking back over years that are lost and things that she can never gain back. And aging and all these themes that are deeply fragile and theatrical at the same time, I think.
Yeah. I was having a conversation only a few days ago with somebody about the importance of the clown, and how there's that, the fool in Shakespeare, and this whole thing about the truth that comes from humor and from the ridiculous sometimes, and how we actually you do think you've been a clown, or whatever. It's
absolutely, and it is very moving. It's all the expression also, Send in the Clowns, as a way of when everything has gone to shite and you're just there's nothing left to say and there's nothing left to do, and the farce and the absurdity of existence. Yeah. And there's nothing left to say, so it's Send in the Clowns.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
I
it's a
love
wonderful
that.
song, isn't it?
I think I do think it's timeless. I do think I hope it is. And I think that I don't see how a song like that could not speak to any new generation, because it's so human. It's
Yeah.
so, if you're a human in this world, there will be a time in your life when those lyrics will ring true
Yeah. And in
at
some
some.
ways, you kind of feel like if if you don't get it, well, that's a good thing. I'm glad you don't get it. I'm glad you
Yes,
don't understand how that pain is.
yes. May you be spared from it, but by virtue of being alive, you probably won't.
No, that's right. Yeah. It's a wonderful version that you've done. So
Thank you
thank you
so
for
much.
that. Yeah. Um, tell me a
Much.
little bit about your background, about how you started singing.
Oh gosh. Well, I started singing. I'm originally from Venice Beach, California, and the first kind of music that I ever sang was really folk music and bluegrass. I started playing guitar when I was 12 years old. I'm a terrible guitarist. I still do write on the guitar, but luckily I have my partner who's a much better string player than I am. Um, I started off singing Joni Mitchell songs at age 12 with a hat out on the boardwalk, mainly because my parents were like, "It's too loud in here. If you want to practice, go practice on the boardwalk." So I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And then later in school, I joined the choir, and it turned out I had a very high voice, and it turned out that I had a voice that could sing classically, and I didn't really know what that was, and I kind of got little tastes of it through the choir, doing little art songs by Vivaldi and whatnot. And pretty soon, that classical bug bit me hard. And by about 14, I would go to the library and geek out on these old recordings of Maria Callas and Beverly Sills, and I was listening to all the sopranos all the greats. And I decided at 14 and a half that I would become an opera singer. And I went to Manhattan School of Music, and I got a degree in voice, and I moved to Germany straight out of college. And I started working as a singer in Bremen, which is about an hour away from Hamburg. And I became what's called a fest singer. So what that means is that you are engaged by the opera house to do about 5 productions a year, and you do these big roles, and you get it's like a baptism by fire. You get all this stage experience, but you also get health insurance, and you're like a fully employed opera singer. It's kind of at least by American standards, it's kind of a wild concept.
Yeah.
And so I that's what I did for most of my adult life was sing classical music, and eventually I got into this very sort of experimental 20th century stuff, and specializing in modern composers, and singing a lot of composers like Ligeti and Hense, and a lot of this sort of 12 tone, about as far away from folk music and bluegrass as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that when I toured and when I went around, the first thing I'd do when I'd get into a hotel or an Airbnb is I'd turn on some bluegrass and I'd turn on some folk music. It's like, there's comfort food. And then
Yeah.
when you're lonely or you're in a strange town and you want to feel safe, then there's comfort music. And so that was always the music I listened to feel safe and connected to home. And then when COVID hit, and my season got canceled, I had just met this banjo player who I'm now married to. And he said, "Well, why don't we do some folk music just for fun?" And we started sending files back and forth. And he said, "Well, why don't we do some Townes Van Zandt? Why don't we sing Tennessee Waltz? Why don't?" And so he got all these guys in Nashville who were also grounded by the pandemic. And we started sending all these files back and forth, and we posted some of it online, and the response was pretty amazing. And then eventually Bluegrass Today picked up our story. It was like, they worded it something crazy like, opera singer sings bluegrass for COVID love, or they
Right.
said something crazy like, but it was actually like, the music that I've sung since I was a little girl. It's just like
Right.
like a homecoming.
Right. And that, of course, led to this album of Sondheim. So,
It did. It did. We had one album before that we're of tunes that we wrote ourselves that I guess you would classify as kind of an Americana album. But genre is such a funny thing, and it's something I think about a lot because I obviously don't fit into any genre. Um, it's kind of Americana and it's kind of folk. But my background is as a classical musician, and I was a theater kid in school, and so I'm kind of at peace with the fact that um, hopefully, my what I do will speak to those it speaks to, and it's not easy to. I recognize it's not easy to put me in a box, um, and I found my peace with that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's really interesting because I started this podcast in lockdown, so sort of just about 3 years ago, and I started off because I'm quite organized, and so I kind of I got myself some folders, and I had a classical download folder and a jazz download folder, and very quickly I realized that actually there were quite a lot of things that could have gone in both or could have gone in neither, or whatever. And this podcast more than anything has taught me the lack of genre is a really good thing, to just be open to listening to music.
It's frequently the music that excites me the most when I listen to like a John Baptiste, when I listen to who else? I mean, when I listen to Yo-Yo Madu, Goat Rodeo, there's something that feels larger than a drawer, and that is in some ways the kind of music that excites me the most. Even though the word crossover is sort of a can be sort of a funny thing, because I also believe in respecting. As an opera singer, I find it really important that if I'm singing folk music, I would never impose an operatic aesthetic on that, because to me that would be like disrespectful of the genre a little bit. It's like there's a certain way in the classical world you would sing Puccini differently than you would sing Purcell, differently than you would sing French music. It's like it's a funny balance, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you were talking about that, I was thinking about Bizet and I was thinking about Carmen, because some elements of that are almost folk music, aren't they? Some of they're sort of, like troubadour songs, and there's it's as you say, there's a thing about respecting the composer and the type of music that they wanted to create, but also about being open to that cross genre thing.
Exactly. It's funny because in the classical world, I always feel like if you can sing an aria with the simplicity, the hardest thing in the world is to be simple. It's easier to be flashy, and it's easier to be complicated, but to be simple in the way that a folk song is simple is so much harder. So if you can do an aria the way you would sing a really simple folk song, then that's when that aria is the most moving. For me, that's when I experience the aria as being the most moving.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So where can people find out about you? Where can they listen to the music, and where can they perhaps see you live if they're in the right part of the world?
Oh my goodness. So we have all of our music on Spotify and iTunes. So if they go under Sara, Shiloh Ray, and Bluebird Junction, we're there. They can follow me on Instagram, Sara Shiloh Ray. It's at Sara Shiloh Ray, or on Facebook, Sara Shiloh Ray as well. And if anybody is in the United States, our next performance will be with the Amarillo Symphony. Well, it's actually not Sara Shiloh Ray and Bluebird Junction, but myself and my partner Max are going to be performing with the Amarillo Symphony. It's going to be an amazing evening in America. The first time I've ever sung classical music and bluegrass on the same program. And we're going to have tunes that we wrote ourselves, arranged by Miles Sloniker, who's brilliant, who also is the arranger for the Sondheim album. And it's going to be really special. So if anyone is in Texas or even in America and wants to come down to Amarillo, they've got a really good band, a wonderful British conductor called George Jackson, who's a complete innovator and beautiful creative mind. So everyone who
Brilliant.
wants to take a trip and have some good barbecue afterwards as well.
Excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I'll point people at all of those things in the show notes.
Wonderful.
But thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really, really great conversation.
I'd like to propose a toast. Here's to the ladies who lunch. Everybody laugh. Lounging in their caftans and having a brunch on their own behalf. After the gym, then to a fitting claiming they're fat. Then looking grim, cause they've been sitting choosing a hat. Does anybody still wear a hat? I'll drink to that. Here's to the girls who stay smart.
Thank you for joining me once more on Harmonious World, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Sara Shiloh Ray. What you're listening to now is Ladies Who Lunch. And there's something a little bit angry and drunken about this in a very, very good way. Thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World. Please don't forget that you can rate, review, share this episode. You can also subscribe to the podcast as a whole, which just helps me keep on doing what I'm doing. But thank you for joining me in any case, and have a great week.
Just to keep in touch. The ones who follow the rules and meet themselves at the schools, too busy to know that they are fools. Are they gems? I'll drink to them. Let's all drink to them.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.